arable land in South Africa is owned by European descended people. Okay, 30% of all of the native African South Africans find themselves to be unemployed. When you look at the excuse me, I got that one wrong. But no, that's correct. 30% unemployed, but 65% are considered very, very poor. And very, very poor means earning less than $2 a day. Okay, that's the figure for that. But when you look at the other piece of the African continent issue, of the 50 least developing countries in the world, 34 of them are in Africa. Of the least developing countries in the world, of the 50 least developing countries, 34 of them are in Africa. And of the countries with the lowest human development index, according to the United Nations, in 2009, 22 of 24 of those are in Africa. So when you look at the African continent as a whole, you find abject poverty, as it is called. You have a few emerging millionaires and billionaires, and especially you see this pattern in South Africa, but you see it in Nigeria as well, with all of the excess capital that has resulted from oil production. The distribution pattern is looking the same way. Well, that doesn't augur very well for the future of the African continent, just like it doesn't augur well for the United States of America. You all remember a movement a few years ago called Occupy, where young people were on Wall Street pointing out this contradiction and calling for policy change. Well, what is happening with Bernie Sanders today is just an extension of the challenge that the Occupy movement raised some time ago, which in many ways is similar to what the Black Lives Matter movement is saying, because at the end of the day, what those young people are saying is we don't have any jobs, we don't have access to the revenue streams, we don't have access to all the services that we need, and there's nothing to do. You will hear that very often said, there's nothing to do for these young black men especially, who they claim many of them are not involved in an uprising but a burning down of their cities. So there is this relationship between uprising and social unrest and the concentration of capital into the hands of a small number of people, or the over-concentration of capital into the hands of a number of countries that are differentiated by income levels, unemployment levels, lifespan levels, educational achievement levels, infant mortality levels. When you look at the African continent, you see all those indicators saying that Africa is once again at the bottom of the barrel. Though political independence indeed has taken place, but economic independence has not taken place, nor is there democracy. There's a pretense in some countries that voting takes place. But in reality, there are at least 7 to 8 countries right now that are looking at changing their constitutions so that their presidents can retain power, so that a small elite few can retain control of most of the capital. It's interesting what they just did in Nigeria, which is the president of the country, Buhari, took control of the oil industry himself, the oil ministry himself, because the previous oil minister had been bought off, and the capital had been absconded with. There were high-level government officials who had done that. When you talk to Africans on the continent about what is of concern to them and what is bothering them, you always hear the issue of corruption. You'll always hear the issue of public services, which is water, and sewer, and roads, transportation, and especially power, because there's a significant problem with that. You'll always hear the issue of jobs. You'll hear the issue of what they call nepotism and tribalism, which is ethnic conflict between ethnic groups. And you will always hear people arguing about what they call governance, which is how the system is governed and managed and whose hands it is in, etc. It seems as though the African continent in the world scene today is trying to find where it is located, though it has a large volume of the world's mineral resources, and they are increasingly expanding because new oil finds are being discovered in Africa all the time. But it's not the problem. The problem is not just that they lack the technology, it's just that the distribution of the wealth of those resources is so skewed towards a minority of people in the country, a minority of classes in the country. And that's part of why there will be continued very intense conflict, I predict, over the next quarter of a century, that there will be even more disruption on the African continent than there has been in the last 25 years, because this gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, wider and wider between the haves and the have-nots. And again, you see this in places like South Africa, especially, where since they achieved so-called independence, the poverty levels have gone up, and they've got this program for affirmative action where there are a few black millionaires, but that money is not being distributed downward towards the whole of the population, and the resources are not being distributed in a way that seems to be democratic, quote unquote. So those countries that are in the mode of being developed countries have not learned from the United States, because sometimes in the United States we don't think we have a problem. We are a democracy, as we say, but we really aren't when you really look at the figures. There are 44 million people in formal poverty in America, and there's probably another 50 million who are near poverty. And this is a supposed democracy. And these are not all just black people and Latinos, by the way, who are in poverty. The majority of those in formal poverty happen to be Anglo, they happen to be of European descent. But the percentage of the African Americans by population is what is larger, because at least 2/3 of the population among the black community is arguably economically marginal, if not poor, in poverty or in poverty, working poor. So when we try to tell people here how to run their business on the African continent, I say, j'accuse. Look at yourself first. Show me how you are a democracy. Show me how you have fairly and equitably treated your own people before you can tell us what we should be doing, which is not to excuse the African continent, because it still has the great majority of the world's resources, but the people have got to rise up to take control of the resource distribution pattern so that there can truly be some sort of democracy. And after all, Africa has come a long way through the period of imperialism and colonialism, and now some would simply say it is in the period of neo-colonialism. But anyway, we need to talk about this. We need to hear what you're thinking about it and exchange some more ideas, and I have some more numbers that can be used to support the argument about where is the diaspora, and whether the diaspora sees itself as is still connected to the homeland, or are diasporans more connected to the country that they have migrated to than they are to their own country, and are they going back and forth? And there is this issue of dollars being transferred between here and the native country. That is a huge part of the economy of the future that you all will be caught up in, one way or the other. If you stay here, you're going to transmit money back to the land of origin, or you will develop technical skills, a good job, and then bring the money home. But that seems to be a permanent part of the landscape today between this country and countries on the African continent. So you're going to have to answer that question too, and about the brain drain. You know, will you take your talents and skills and go back to another country with them, or will you stay here and try to fight the battle to bring equality and justice on this side of the shore? One thing is for certain, we're all in this one together. There is no us and them. There really isn't. If you stay here in America, it's we. It ain't like I'm going back someplace and leave y'all here and escape you. And there ain't no place for us to escape and go, those of us who are already here. So we can stop fictionalizing and idealizing that there's a heaven for us somewhere. Heaven has to be where we are, that we make it, because there's no place that you can escape the problem of this exponential increase in world ownership of the capital resources, the problem of governance, the problem of healthcare and infant mortality, the problem of disease, the problem of education. I mean, something new is cropping up every day, and climate change gonna catch us all. You can't run, you can't hide. That's what I'm saying. So I understand this time that we take a break, get a little bit of food, and let's come back and talk about what you think about some of the solutions to some of what I've said, some of the ways we can work through these problems and try to attack them. Is that all right with everybody?